All right, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Raul Cepeda Jr. On behalf of Barcodes Inc., Synactive, Graybar, and Zebra Technologies, I'd like to thank you for attending our webinar today on how to rapidly customize and mobilize SAP. We know your time's precious, and we hope you gain some valuable insights today into our platform solution that we'll be going over. We do have a Q&A feature available on this webinar, so please feel free to send us any questions along the way, and we'll address them as we go or at the end as time allows. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Tony Holland, Synactive's Global Director of Channels. Tony?
Hi, this is Tony Holland, and I am a sales engineer supporting this Barcodes partnership. And I will be joined by one of our SAP customers, Graybar, who will give you their real-life experience using Liquid UI. Today, I'm going to give you an overview of Synactive's SAP GUI solution for the mobile operating systems, such as the Android, running on a Zebra. And the question I'm going to answer is, what if you could connect to SAP immediately without programming, without middleware like Telnet, SAP Console, or ITS Mobile, with no security gaps, no performance latency, or IT rollout delays, or user adoption obstacles? Well, you can today with the SAP GUI from Liquid UI on your Android, iOS, or Windows CE operating system. Liquid UI from Synactive is the only SAP GUI for the Android operating systems, iOS, or Windows CE available in the market. Liquid UI lets you take the reliable and powerful SAP GUI that you're already familiar with, that has driven the successful use of SAP, and modernize it and put it seamlessly onto mobile devices. You can run your existing business processes, including customized Z transactions, without any programming, while leveraging your existing ERP or S/4HANA stack. Using our JavaScript engine, you can optionally further enhance and simplify the SAP GUI business processes. With Liquid UI, you can gain significant returns on your investment, and you can utilize the device's sensors or camera functionality to scan barcodes, QRCs, or even RFID. You can gain significant returns on your mobile investment across your entire enterprise in multiple lines of businesses, such as warehouse management, where SAP customers are seeing 40% increases in productivity and 50% reductions in errors. There are over 1,000 customers running this SAP GUI on mobile devices with Liquid UI today. And here's an example of just a few of the customers globally that are running this SAP GUI and getting these types of advantages. So now I'm going to pass the baton over to Brian Summers, the Director of Business Technology at Graybar Electric, and he will give you a demonstration of his real-life experience running the SAP GUI on mobile devices for his SAP environment. Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I appreciate you having us here today. The first slide here we're going to get to about Graybar talks a little bit of an overview about who Graybar is. You might not have recognized us as a household name like Tyson's or GE or some of those other names on that slide a moment ago that Tony shared. But as you can see here on the Graybar slide, Graybar is an employee-owned company that began in 1869, excuse me, and has over 7 billion in sales. I'm sure the Graybar slide will be here with us in a moment. There we go. It looks like it's catching up a little bit. There we go. So we had 7.6 billion in sales in 2019, and one of the largest privately held companies in the nation. That doesn't mean a lot to you, but I think this next slide will help you understand the problem and why we needed a partner like Liquid UI and Synactive to help solve for some of our business processes. We have over 130,000 customers. We process in excess of 27,000 orders a day. Millions of materials, thousands and thousands of suppliers. We have 250 warehouse locations nationwide here in the United States. And our job is to move material, both checking it into our warehouse and then getting it back out to our customers in a timely fashion. And that's really been a challenge for us to modernize that, to get away from sort of the traditional paper and pen way of doing everything. And we're really fortunate to find a partner in Synactive to help us address those with these 3 apps here that you can see on this screen: goods receipt, cycle count, and counter orders. Traditionally, again, with a paper and a pencil, if you're doing something like a cycle count in a warehouse, you have multiple different locations where things are located, and you have to kind of write down each one. You can get interrupted in between. You have to manually add those counts at the end of the day, and there's error-prone steps to each of these. Receiving and where you actually have the goods on the dock and where the computer are normally hundreds of feet away. You waste a lot of time going back and forth. And then the idea of the Graybar, in addition to just warehousing, has a sort of retail spot and piece where people can come in, DIYs, or even our B2B customers can come into our counter and place orders sort of on demand. And our counter personnel will go back and pick that material and bring it back and deliver it there at the counter. So those are the 3 things we really tried to set out to modernize and mobilize. And I'm going to hand it over here to my peer, Ashton McDaniel, that's going to talk a little bit about 2 of the apps, and then I'll come back and talk about the counter order app. Ashton?
Yeah, Brian, you got me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So yeah, as Brian and everyone said, we've been a partner with Liquid UI for a very long time, lots of years, done lots of stuff on traditional SAP. These 3 applications that we currently use are utilized in our locations today. This first one that we're going to talk about is the goods receipt function. So today, a lot of this stuff comes in, lands on the dock, or users going over to a terminal or an SAP station, having to pull up that purchase order, see what materials on that PO, manually walk back, count that material, go lots of back and forth between that and handwritten notes and different things like that. So with this application, they're able to carry it on their phone. They can actually scan the material, go through the material on this as it's available, and check that material in. It's a lot different from the standard SAP screen. As they code through this, they can hit OK on those items, submit those items, and move to the next piece. It's the same look and feel that they see in SAP, so it's not a lot of training for them to understand what they're seeing, that it's a completely different UI. And as you can see, one of the other features is that UPC option. So if they got an item and for some reason they can't find it, they can scan that UPC and search that purchase order that has hundreds of items on it and quickly find the item they're trying to receive. And they can do all that from that mobile device. The next item we're going to be talking about is probably the one that's used the most in our process is cycle count. So cycle counts traditionally within Graybar is a manual process that gets generated. A piece of paper gets printed to the machine or to a warehouse printer. Those cycle counts have to be done first thing every single morning. Because there's open counts against that material, no one in the location is allowed to sell that material. It's not allowed to get released until that cycle count's finished. Well, what we end up with is some locations have 100 or 200 items that they have to go count every single day. What they're allowed to do is through the Liquid UI app is go through those, enter these counts as they're counting that material, submit these counts immediately, which not only allows that process to be done quicker and more efficiently, but it also allows that material to be released to those customers for sale which is definitely a big plus. Last thing you want to do is lose sales because there's an open count on material. So that's really, and it's following the same process as SAP. So they're very familiar with these screens. With that kind of wraps up those two pieces. I'll turn it back over to Bryant to talk about a more in-depth application that we did with counter order entry. Bryant?
Thanks, Ashton. Yeah, so to Ashton's point, I think the screenshot you see here on this screen should be very indicative of the GUI, right? It should look familiar to everyone. It's kind of the point Tony was making at the beginning. This is the sort of power that Liquid UI can give you that can connect you directly to the GUI and help you modernize and mobilize your business processes with easy to understand and very familiar screens, to Ashton's point there at the end. So again, this app is the least adopted of the three we're talking about today. It's also the only one where everything's variable, right? If you show up in the morning and you are supposed to do a cycle count, it's pretty straightforward, like you saw on the previous screen, to sort of have those items listed for you. You have a location code, you walk to the location, you count everything on the page because you know that that's everything that's in that location. You click next, you go to the next location, and it's kind of done for you, right? Or with the receiving app, once you scan that barcode, you get a list of all the items that you're going to receive and the quantities that you're expecting to receive. And most times in our business anyway, and I think in many businesses, you get a complete shipment, or you get the total quantity. You order 100, you get 100, that kind of thing. And so it's easy to automate some of those things with pre-population. But when you talk about the counter app, it's different, right? You never know who's going to walk into your retail application. And then once you recognize them and you find them, like the screen kind of describes, like, hey, let's look for the customer. Then on the next screens here, you'll kind of see how you have to then on to, well, I got to find the material that they want. And then I have to sort of summarize and try to modernize what's been a very manual process. So again, at our counters, people walk in, they usually have a handwritten list of the materials they need. And it's kind of like a grocery store back behind the counter, right? So you can't go around and pick your own groceries. You have to give your list to our guy. And traditionally, he would go back with a cart or just his arms or in hands and arms, whatever he needed. And he'd run all over the grocery store, grabbing all the groceries, come back to the counter, and then start doing the scanning. Well, it seemed to us that you could improve that, especially since there's barcodes throughout our warehouses. It seemed to us that you could use the native technology in the phone to start scanning those items as you were picking it. As you were grabbing the apples off the shelf, why wouldn't you just scan apples into your order so that you can kind of expedite this process? It seemed well enough. You can kind of see there on the right-hand picture frame here how we decided to default in a delivery block so that our counters have the ability and have some merchandise on display. So while you're in the back picking everything on the guy's list, we're hoping that he's going to grab some batteries or a screwdriver or something else that would be out there at the counter, and he's going to want to let us have an add-on sale. But if not, if you know that it's a pre-printed sort of company purchase order or something where you know he isn't going to add to it at all, you could uncheck this box and let the process start to print the documents necessary for a signature capture and confirmation of goods receipts so that the customer can be sort of on their way as soon as you get back to the counter. So those were really the three apps that we were trying to, the three things we were trying to solve for: cycle count, goods receipt, and then this idea of counter orders and sort of a retail experience. And then on the next screen here, Ash and I can share with you some of the things we learned along the way. I'll kick off with a couple of them. The first and the last one, I think, kind of go together. Mobility isn't enough, and simplicity rules. And I guess I was kind of talking about that a few moments ago about our counter app. It isn't a simple process by definition, almost, right? Again, every time customer comes in, it's a different customer, they have a different bill of material, and it requires different things and different screens. And because of that, it gets infinitely more and more complex. And doing some of that on your phone with your thumbs isn't as quick as the time you learned to sort of key on your keyboard over time using the GUI. It just seems faster or quicker to the users, despite some of the inherent advantages of click to scan and that kind of thing that's inherent to the phone. So I think those were two of the big ones for me, Ashton. I don't know if you want to pick out a couple here and talk about some of the lessons you learned.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things, obviously, that Bryant mentioned is obviously the simplicity and mobility is not enough. One of the other things we learned a lesson of is everybody thinks, well, you got coverage everywhere in our location. So we have some very large facilities, 50,000 square feet warehouses that are metal buildings that don't actually have the best cell phone service in them. That was a little bit of a learning curve for us to get connectivity ironed out. If you have locations that have an issue with wireless access or hotspots in those warehouses, that is something that you definitely want to take into consideration. The other piece is obviously it works really good for these straightforward, easy processes, those 3-4 step processes where a user can quickly flow through those screens and there's not a lot of decisions to be made. When we talk about the adoption rate on these applications, obviously cycle count and the goods receipt are heavily adopted because those processes, there's not a lot of options. Either you have it or you don't. Where counter, there's a lot of choices and decisions that are being made through that process. Some users are a little less likely to navigate towards that application for that reason. So those are the big ones that I would say from my side that we noticed the most on.
Yeah, I think one of the important things too is this one about the timeout. Remember, you're on a mobile device. All of us have the settings on our phone. At some point to just sort of go dark when you stop using your phone. Well, that's all well and good when it's a text message or whatever. You set your phone down, it's going to beep the next time that you get a message, so you don't really care if it sort of goes dark or goes dormant. But when you're in the middle of a cycle count or a goods receipt or a counter order, you don't want that to happen, right? You don't want to risk losing the work in progress that you've already completed. So, that was this idea of timeout, both on the phone itself. And then remember that you're connecting, you have an SAP connection, right? You're connecting to the GUI through the mobile device, and you're going to need your basis team or someone to go through and make sure that gateway or that timeout is as long as possible. At least that was made the most sense for us. In our example, sometimes you want to use multiple apps, right? You're doing a cycle count, and then a truck comes and it's got an emergency shipment on it, and you need to go and do that receiving. Well, your cycle count again is in process, so you don't want to lose that work. And so you need to make sure that connection stays while you go and do whatever it is that you're called away for doing. So that was another one that really helped with user adoption. Once we got those settings sort of maxed, so to speak, that, and then the connectivity that Ashton mentioned, people think that you can just use Wi-Fi or whatever, but in these huge 100,000 square foot warehouses or larger in some cases, having a connectivity was an issue to the Wi-Fi. So we really ended up going and suggesting that they just use 5G or their normal connection rather than trying to rely on Wi-Fi, because anytime they lost the connection, they risked losing the work. And that was, again, it gets to defeating the purpose of automation if they have to do it twice or 3 times because they keep losing their connection. So I think that's what we had, Tony, unless you got any closing comments there, Ashton.
Well, I do see a question that actually popped up in the question and answer that actually kind of falls into the same type of thing. So yeah, the users are actually logging into SAP from their mobile device. So they actually have a connection logging into SAP just like they would from their PC or their station. So there's a setup with a server that they're connected through, and I'm sure that we can share that information through the meeting.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mike. It's the good thing is that Synactive will help you build that sort of login so that you can authenticate to your back end. You can also save those credentials so that you can save having to type them each and every time over and over and over again. It helped us again with getting some of that adoption going, just being able to again cut some of that repetitiveness out of the process and still have a layer of security that let us every time we update our passwords or whatever, you have to update your password here too. But you don't necessarily have to sign in over and over again every day.
Yeah. And then to your other question there about personal devices or company issued devices, they can use either. So we don't restrict them. Synactive, that is an open app that can be downloaded. So they can put it on a personal device. Obviously, we prefer them to use a company device. And we did supply those in these warehouse locations so they can use those. Similar to same devices that our delivery drivers carry when they're out making deliveries. Nothing special, but just an Android tablet, like a 7-inch tablet is what most of them are using.
Guys, that was awesome. Are there any other questions? So with that, I'm going to pass the baton over to Raul and the Barcodes team.
Thanks, Tony. So now that you've all learned a little bit about Synactive's platform, you might be asking yourself how Barcodes Group fits into everything. So as a premier solutions provider of both Synactive and Zebra Technologies, our different entities are out here to basically design, deploy, and support these solutions, get you up and running, and then ultimately support them. We can offer around-the-clock support for not only the platform, but all the deployed hardware out there. And we'll go into some of the options there in a moment. We have developers on staff that are familiar with all the different OS platforms, so we can help integrate these solutions into existing WMS or ERP systems. And then more importantly for you, especially for those of you that may not have a fully staffed IT group there, we do have a professional services staff that can help conduct an assessment to validate your requirements for a mobilized SAP application. And then from there, we can help you stage, kit, configure, install, triage, and repair all the hardware that's associated with the solution, including managing all the mobile devices with the hosted mobile device management software. So we're here essentially to support you and your needs, be a partner on your IT infrastructure. And then in terms of Zebra, we partner with and supply and support all the technology from Zebra Technologies. They are the world's largest manufacturer of data capture hardware. Heard earlier, how they have some deployed items, Graybar with Android devices. Zebra does have a full lineup of enterprise gun grip devices, more ergonomic consumer grade devices, tablets, wearable technology, and then even head-mounted technology that incorporates augmented reality. They've migrated, so they are on the latest Android operating system. They do still have some legacy Windows devices, but we all know Android is kind of the future in this enterprise-grade technology. But that's not all. We can deliver a full solution by equipping your organization with other products as well, right? So while this app is primarily used on mobile devices, there's a lot of peripherals around it. So barcode scanners, RFID equipment, label printers, even the consumables, your labels, your actual barcode labels, your barcode ribbon print heads, and even all the wireless networking equipment to make sure that everything stays connected within your facilities. So at the end of the day, our goal is to partner with you to get you up and running with these future-proof technologies like you saw today. So we do got, I know we answered a couple questions there. The other question that came up, This is, I think, more for the Graybar team. What metrics or quantified improvements have you realized since implementing the solution?
Yeah, so that's a good question too. About a third of our cycle counts and our good receipts now are done through the mobile app. It continues to increase slightly by a couple percentage points every month since rollout. So we had started with 250 locations. We started small with just a handful having access. Worked out some of the kinks. Again, that's where we learned a lot of these lesson learns around connectivity and the timeout issues and some of those other things. And so then once we felt confident with that, we rolled it out to the company wide. And again, especially on those two apps that are repetitive, we continue to see adoption just grow and grow. So it's been a very good move for us, and we continue to look ways to challenge ourselves to how we can improve the counter usage as well. I think there's a big advantage there. It just we have to somehow get it to where we can get people to be a little bit quicker than they can be standing at their desk. And if they are, I think they'll gravitate towards it. We just aren't. We're just on the cusp of getting there. So we continue to work with Liquid UI and Synactive on screen improvement, process flow improvement. A counter order can be a complicated thing, and with complexity comes the chance for more screens and more problems on your own. So we're far our way there too. But those are encouraging numbers for us, especially around the cycle count and the goods receipt.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, that does it with all the questions. On behalf of Barcodes Inc., Synactive, Graybar, and Technologies, I'd like to thank you all for joining our webinar today on how to rapidly customize and mobilize SAP. We will be sending out an email with the recording of this webinar, but if you have any further questions or would like to talk to one of our experts for a free consultation or a demo, please feel free to reach out to your preferred solution you can see on the screen there, or by all means, you can feel free to reach out to me directly. My contact information is there as well. Thanks again for joining, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.